All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Burd Files podcast. It has been officially 5 years since the last hockey talk on this podcast, so a little bit of a brief hiatus. If you follow NHL discussion, you know what I'm talking about. But we're back here. I'm here with Zach. Say your last name because I always read it. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
Just
it's Zach Spanhak. So
okay.
like Span and Ick, you just put them together.
Okay, Spanhak. I'm here with Zach Spanhak. Funny story. We met through Packback in a political science class. Won't dive too deep into that, but if you have questions, that's a fun story. So, yeah, but today we're going to be talking about just all things NHL. We've got a little bit of a docket of things to talk about, ranging from kind of both of our teams. I'm a Canucks guy. He's a Stars fan. And then some of the big kind of fish to fry, looking at the Florida Panthers and how they were able to keep everybody down there. Mitch Marner signing with Vegas, well, signing, quotation marks on that. Talking about the Canes and Habs, their offseason, who's the winner of the offseason, some of the draft highlights, maybe talk about some of the steals and some of the potential duds that we saw in the first round, and then we'll touch a little bit on the CBA. So that's kind of the goal of today's discussion, but wherever this takes us, it takes us. But yeah, Zach, I'll just give you a chance to introduce yourself, and then we can just kind of jump into everything and anything.
Yeah, my name's Zach Spanhak. I'm a student at A&M. Kind of the big thing with me in hockey right now is I started a Substack not too long ago called Shorthanded with Zach Spanhak. Obviously, that's me. And so I've just been really trying to dive in a little bit more into writing about hockey, talking about hockey. Obviously, I've been a fan for quite some time now, but just trying to get some of my thoughts out there. So super hyped to be here and to talk about the offseason because it's been pretty exciting. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this offseason, I don't know, there's been a lot of stuff happening, but I feel like the free agency was a little bit disappointing. But regardless of that, has been some pretty big splashes for both of our teams in terms of teams getting good contracts done and offloading stuff. So yeah, let's start with the Stars. I mean, you obviously have a better kind of scope of that team than I do. You've got an entire kind of designated article side for that. So yeah, just start us off there, man.
Yeah, the Stars offseason was honestly, it went kind of close to expectations, but not exactly as I would have wanted it to go, if that makes sense. Like, I think everyone's probably heard, if they're kind of tuned into the offseason discussions, is that, the Stars have a decent kind of cap issue going on, or at least they did, because they managed during the season to extend a lot of their big names. Jake Ottinger, Wyatt Johnston, Esa Lindell got a pretty big extension, and then obviously they picked up Mikko Rantanen and extended him for 8 years as well. So they did a lot of their offseason moves, during the season. But what that left them with is a team that was kind of looking for cash in a lot of places. So the way the offseason ended up going, they chose to keep Duchesne, which I was a decent fan of that decision. I thought that the term was a little bit long, but for what he brings to the team, you can still get a lot of good value out of that. But pretty much with every acquisition that they've had to bring in, has had to lead to someone, getting sent the other way. So Mason Marchment kind of got moved out just as a victim of the cap, which I know he's a pretty, fan favorite in Dallas. Matt Dumba the other day just got moved out. That was one that probably needed to happen, just with the cap hit that he was at and the value he was bringing to the team were not in alignment. He was, I think $3.75 million, and he didn't even play a single playoff game, and injuries kind of reaped his season as well anyways. But yeah, for the most part, like I said, it went kind of as expected, a little bit underwhelming, but given, what money they actually had to use, I think they did what they could in a lot of ways. So
What do you think about that Marchment trade? I feel like there was a lot of value left on the table for Marchment. Like I know that Dallas was handcuffed in terms of needing to free up that space, but
yeah,
like I think they got a third and a fourth round pick back from him from Seattle. Like,
yeah,
is there not any other team in the NHL that would give up like a second? I know like they don't have a lot of leverage, but a third and a fourth to go to, a team in the same comp. Like I don't fully understand that.
Yeah, it was rough. So I was someone who, when I was looking at my kind of off-season predictions, Marchment was a guy who was kind of in like I could see him getting moved out tier. just because his contract was pretty high, and knowing the space they had and also who they're even able to trade with like no movement clauses and everything, it made sense that he was going to be someone that could get looked at moving out. I also was a little underwhelmed by the return on it. I know he had I think a 10-team no trade list, which probably affected things. And from what I've heard from him in interviews, it looks like Jim Nill also wanted him to end up somewhere that was also a no state income tax location, so that he wouldn't end up like getting a pay cut just because he got moved out essentially.
Right.
So I think that was kind of the thought process there. And then I guess Seattle was just the place that fit the bill. So the draft picks, it wasn't like it was an egregious, return, I'd say, but I was kind of hoping that somehow we could get him in like a 1-to-1 trade for Michelli in Utah, who ended up in Toronto anyways, because Utah was trying to move him out. And I thought that Marchment would be kind of a guy they're sort of looking for. They picked up Brandon Tanev, and him and Marchment kind of fit a similar role, though I think Marchment's a little bit more skilled of a player. So yeah, a little bit underwhelming, but at the same time, like you said, knowing where the Stars were kind of handcuffed by the cap, and then also probably just that little bit of Jim Nill loyalty and kind of Marchment's trade situation as well, play into them kind of just getting what they can get for him. So.
Okay. Yeah. I guess like a third and a fourth is not like, it's obviously not glamorous, but it's not probably the worst value you could have gotten.
Yeah.
It's just like the initial kind of shell shock of seeing a player who can put up, the type of numbers that he does, getting that type of return. I mean, Podkolzin for the Canucks got shipped out to Edmonton for a 4th-round pick last year, so I feel like tacking on the third doesn't really make up the value of Marchment. But But yeah, okay, so a couple of those other things that you touched on. So we talked about Duchesne signing that extension, which for the numbers that he's been putting up the last couple of years, I got to pull those up right in front of me. But the numbers that he's been putting up, I feel like 4.5 as the cap hit is pretty good. The only thing is 4 years for a 34-year-old is a little bit. A little bit nerve-wracking. So I know you touched on it a little bit, but what are your thoughts, kind of more in depth on that signing there?
Yeah. So the mindset that I've heard from a lot of Stars fans going into it, and I'm not sure whether this is like the correct mindset to have, but what I saw was, okay, you're probably going to try to get one of either Granlund or Duchesne to come back. And I think a lot of people were kind of preferring Granlund because he at least can play in a little bit more different areas. Although kind of as time moves on, I start to think that the Duchesne decision was the correct one, especially because I just think Granlund wasn't willing to come down from, I think he ended up getting like $7 million or something like that. So yeah, in terms of the value of the contract, I think it's really good. Like he was a point per game player last year. He was the, I think leading point scorer besides Mikko Rantanen. So the leading point scorer to play or close to it on the team for the entire season. And you're getting him for $4.5 million. Yeah. And he, I think I would be really interested to see what they do with Duchesne, because obviously his like natural position is to be that either second or third line center. But I'm of the mindset, especially now that you're paying Wyatt Johnson upwards of $8 million, that you need to give Johnson the chance to play with some more elevated line mates than like, Jamie Benn. No disrespect to him, just Wyatt Johnson should be playing on the first or second line, in my opinion, or even on the wing or something like that. But I think it would be really, really cool to see Duchesne kind of moved out of the center position, because the Stars center depth is so good. And even letting him play on the wing of like, one lineup I've had like kind of penciled in is like Robertson, Johnson, Duchesne, because on the power play units, when they're together, their chemistry has been just extraordinary. So that would be something I'm interested in. But in terms of the contract, like I said, value is really good. Definitely a little bit hesitant on the term, but from what I've seen, the actual kind of fine details of it, they've really like front loaded the salary on the contract to make it a little bit easier to buy out, or and there's some like kind of trade clauses in there too down the line that make it a little bit easier to free up if Duchesne does take a big regression. So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I actually I guess I wasn't super aware of how much of an impact Duchesne was having. Was he playing on a line with Sagan? His line was Sagan and Marchment all year?
Yes. And it was that was kind of when they brought in Duchesne, I guess it was either last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think last year. When they brought in Duchesne, the thinking was, hey, we need to find someone that can play with Marchment and Sagan, because they brought in Marchment that year before. Him and Sagan were kind of a duo, but they never really had like that third line mate. And they brought in Duchesne, and that line's just like play just elevated so much. And it was really unfortunate because they were always had like one dude injured, so they barely got to play like extended periods of time together. But there were advanced stats saying that they were essentially the most effective line in the league when they were able to play together all healthy. Yeah. So they were really, really dynamic. And I think a lot of that was Duchesne driving that line, which is why it would be really cool for me to see him up with like, a Johnson or Robertson, or even, playing with like Rubahans or something like that, rather than having him kind of just carrying a third line or something. So it'll be a really, really difficult decision for the Stars to make of how they do their lines. Their depth took a little bit of a hit with the off season. And historically, when DeBoer was the coach, he was a very big, you run 4 lines was his philosophy. And so their depth was kind of, sprinkled out. And I think that, I'm not certain how Gulusan is going to approach that, but I think that it would be probably in their best interest to kind of stack the first and second lines, and then just make your third and fourth line, serviceable, which they have the ability to do 100%. So it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of plays out as we get into, get into training camp and preseason, those sorts of things. So.
Okay, yeah, and you touched on something there. You're talking about DeBoer. How about that change there at the end of the season with Pete DeBoer? Kind of some heavy friction there with Jake Ottinger after Game 7 in the or it was Game 6 in the Western Conference Finals. A little bit of friction there, and then that led to the coaching change, and then also kind of your thoughts on them picking Gulutzan over kind of your AHL man, who was it, Graham?
Yeah. It was a crazy kind of few days and events. Like immediately after the game, in the moment, with the decision to pull Ottinger, I wasn't even necessarily like against that choice, because I do kind of buy the idea of like, it can spark your team. You can probably speak better to that than I can. But I was surprised when Ottinger didn't come back in. That was what really kind of ticked me off, that something was like not right there, because they come out of the first period, they're down 2 goals, which is a deficit they've come back on before. And Casey DeSmith has done a good job as the backup, but like if you're in your like do or die moment,
he's not
why you don't put in your franchise goalie, I don't quite understand. But he goes with that, and then I think everything would have been like mostly fine. But after the game, he's like, yeah, we've Jake Ottinger's lost however many games to Edmonton over the last 2 years. And it's like, what is the point of that? Like, what is the benefit of that? And especially because like as much as you could say that, I don't think Ottinger has been the problem in either of their conference final losses. And you could just as easily say, well, Pete DeBoer has lost however many games to Edmonton in the last 2 years, like, because they're on the same team. So that was a little interesting. And then for really, I think what put the nail in the coffin was for him to come to end of season media availability and say, kind of double down on the same thing, and then also say, oh, I haven't had the chance to talk with Ottinger.
Yeah, the fact that they hadn't talked yet was pretty insane. And like, I just listening to other like hockey podcasts, it kind of seemed like the general consensus was that, okay, it's recoverable after Game 6, right?
Yeah.
You have a conversation with the player, you sit down, you iron it out, but you don't have a conversation with that player, a week later when the whole team's coming out, and you're doing your media availability. Like that's signifying a larger problem there, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I know that goalie has had his first media kind of thing with everybody, and everyone said, oh, hey, he said all the right things, which I think the coach is pretty much always going to do that. Maybe there's a few coaches in the NHL who or have been in the NHL who would mess up on their first day of being in front of everybody. But I'm happy about the decision. I think he's done pretty good work in Edmonton. Running that power play. I saw some stats. It's easy to say, well, they have McDavid, they have Draisaitl. Like, of course, their power play is going to be good. But the season before he got brought in, their power play was not good at all. And ever since he's been there, they were clicking at one of the best rates in the league. It will be interesting though, because Graham is coming in. And I think they have him running the power play right now. So I'm curious how that dynamic is going to work, but I'm really glad that they still got Graham behind the bench. I think he's a huge, up and coming kind of coaching star, if you could ever call somebody that. I think it'll be a great experience. And my hope is that eventually, I think I wrote in an article that the way I see it is that Neil Graham is the next coach of the Dallas Stars, most likely. It's just, when is that going to be, essentially? So I'm definitely happy about this coaching tandem, or coaching group rather. I know they just brought in another coach from Edmonton to kind of be their eye in the sky sort of dude. And I think the other thing that is, I heard somebody discussing this, I don't remember who it was. Basically, during this season, the Stars kind of changed the way they played defense and started playing more of a man-on-man system rather than kind of the more zone-focused system they played before. And their defensive numbers definitely took a hit this year. It was kind of a pretty constant complaint among Stars fans. So I'm interested if that was a Pete DeBoer sort of choice rather than Elaine Nasruddin, who typically runs the Stars defense. If goalie kind of commits to, he said, giving his assistant coaches more autonomy, if that's something we actually see the Stars kind of shore up a little bit this year. So
interesting. Yeah. And you mentioned the power play. I'm looking at some stats here. It looks like the Stars are right in the middle of the pack. They ranked 17 in power play percentage at 22 this year for the league. So, I mean, what do you think they can do? I mean, their unit, I'm not sure, because they had a lot of kind of flux in their lineup between, September and the end of the year, right? Especially in March, bringing in a bunch of big guns. So, what do you think is kind of like the big moves you think that they can make on the power play to move up into the upper echelon of the power play teams in the NHL?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because they kind of have almost like a curse of resources where they have so many people they could plug into the power play units that it's like going to be difficult, I think, for them to make those decisions. I recall that, so one of the reasons their power play was so abysmal this year, I say abysmal is middle of the pack, but the first half of the season, their power play was like one of the worst in the league, without a doubt. The second half of the season, their power play was one of the best in the league. So it's kind of averaged out into this like middle ground. And at one point, they had a unit that was like, I might get a name wrong or two. It was like Robo, Duchesne, Johnston, Hintz, and I think Harley was the top unit or something like that. And that was kind of what started to revive their power play numbers. And that unit's like stats were like they were absurd. Like you expect there to be a regression from that, but it would be interesting to see them throw that together. But then that leaves Mikko Rantanen off of your top power play unit, which also feels like kind of a crime. So I'm not sure exactly what they're gonna cook up, but I definitely would like to see. It's interesting because like I said, their pieces are just so good in terms of what they can throw together, and they all kind of bring a different thing. Like I think a lot of people want to see Harley on the top unit, but the way he plays on the power play is so different from Miro Heiskanen, and yet they're both so effective. Harley is the guy who will like find the lane, get the shot in on the net, and hope for either a tip or for a rebound, kind of create chances that way. Whereas Heiskanen is really, really good at setting people up for a good opportunity. So it'll be really interesting to see what they end up constructing.
What are your thoughts on running a 3-forward, 2 defenseman power play? Like I know in the NHL, even at like the level that I play, the ACHA, fucking Division II, it's kind of like the typical strategy to run 4-1. But you have 2 essentially 1A, 1B defensemen on this team that could totally be on a power play, and especially with their different play styles, they could, be cohesive together. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting, honestly. Like I think I've thought about that a little bit, because really you notice it when Heiskanen was out for forever basically during the season, and he comes back during the playoffs, and they actually go to him it was either on the second unit or the top unit. I can't remember what they immediately went to, but you immediately realize, oh wow, he plays the power play so differently than Harley does, and I think it would be a pretty cool thing, especially like if you can have someone like that who's such a dynamic skater and can maybe like open up some areas of the ice to get Harley a little bit of a better lane. He's already so good at finding those shots that I think that would be really interesting. And I think it would also be cool to maybe let them give a look to Lundqvist on the second power play unit. I know he's had some power play time in the past, and he's also really good at creating offense by just kind of getting shots to the net. So I think that would be could be a good idea for them to look to, especially if they want to kind of help Nils Lundqvist take that next step this year. So,
right. And Nils Lundqvist, that's a guy that they just got some pen to paper done with, right? It looks like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking here. They signed him up for 1.25 for a year, a little bit of a prove it deal for the
Yep.
24-year-old. So I guess you're saying that you think he could potentially crack power play time this year?
Yeah, so like I said, he's had some like fledgling time before. Because it was usually whenever somebody was injured, they would sometimes give Nils a look at the power play. But I know him and Pete DeBoer didn't have the best relationship. Um, really, what has been rough for Lundqvist is that he's no longer waivers exempt. He's not been waivers exempt since he's been in Dallas.
Right.
And I think he's someone who, like Thomas Harley, could really use some time in the AHL to work on kind of some areas of his game that he doesn't quite have yet at the NHL level. Because when when he first played in the NHL, most fans were like, this kid is not good. And for people who were in Cedar Park, kind of like me, and had seen him play, like, no, he's good. He just has some areas that he needs to fix. And basically what the
Right.
Stars did is they said to him, hey, we're sending you back to the AHL for a season. We want you, I think they literally told his coaches, like, do not let him play on the power play. Let him only play defense, essentially, and teach him how to be a defenseman. And they basically did that. And now he is, a rising star in the league. Made Team Canada, did decently well in that game as well. And I think Lundqvist could benefit from that, but the reality is he's not going to have that opportunity. So they have to find ways to help him develop some of those skills. And I think just give him a little bit more trust. He did a lot of the work last year. Apparently in the offseason, he bulked up a lot, and that was one kind of big complaint. He's kind of a smaller guy. He bulked up a lot, and then he basically just got injured like a month into the season and had to get shoulder surgery and miss the rest of the season. So last year was supposed to be his prove it moment, and I'm really glad that they're giving him kind of one last shot, especially because if he does end up taking the next step, then great, you have a pretty decent defenseman for like a little over $1 million or $1.25 million. And if he doesn't, then okay, maybe you can look to use him in a trade or something like that, or you move on. So I think Jim Nill trusts him a lot and believes in him a lot, and is hoping. I'm hoping that with the new coaching staff that they'll also kind of give him a little bit more opportunity than DeBoer did. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Stars have one of the they just have a pretty excellent defensive core. Just coming from a Canucks fan who has struggled in that area for years. It seems like a decade now. It seems like you have a really solid top six, and especially a solid, probably one of the best defensive tandems in the NHL with Harley and Heiskanen. But then you drop down. You got Lindell. You guys moved on from Dumba. You moved on from CC, but you have Bischel, who just this year really is when I kind of got acquainted with Bischel, watching him in the playoffs. That guy is a fucking monster. I mean,
dude, yeah.
Yeah, I mean he just wrecks people, and he's got some touch too. Like I saw him score a goal in the playoffs. That was like, guys this big shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the entire defensive core just feels like it's one of the best in the NHL. I mean,
yeah, and I probably sound greedy all the time because this has been like my one complaint with the Stars actually for the last few years, and I think a lot of Stars media have also kind of jumped onto this, is that like we complain about their defense, and it's not because their defense isn't good. It's because like they have like as a team, if you look at what is the Dallas Stars, what are they missing? This is like the one area where they actually have a hole in, and it's the right side of their defense. Because Miro Heiskanen is supposed to be playing on his left side. Harley is a left shot defenseman. Lindell left shot. Bischel left shot. That's four of your six defensemen. We're already starting to have a problem here. And basically, what has happened is that I guess it was 2 years ago now. They picked up Chris Tanev at the deadline, and he was like that perfect fit. It's like, okay, yes, this is exactly what we need. Like, we need this. And they couldn't keep him in the offseason, and the mindset was, okay, we need to find that Chris Tanev replacement, which I don't think you can find a perfect replacement for, but there were a lot of right shot defensemen that summer. I guess it was the summer of, would have been the summer of 2024 or 2023, one of those two.
yeah.
And
So basically what we watched.
What we watched is every right shot defenseman we wanted the Stars to get got picked up somewhere else, was too expensive, whatever it was. And they settled on Ilya Lyubushkin and Matt Dumba, which is like, okay, that's fine. That's who you got. But the problem was that they overpaid the two of them. And I know a lot of people like Lyubushkin's game. I'm not anti, whenever I talk about like players and their value, like I'm not anti any of the players or anything like that. It just comes down to like, hey, we need to make sure we're getting out of this player the money that we're spending on them, because that's just how it works in like the salary cap era. And Lyubushkin had a decent season. It's just that, I think it was Juraj Kralik said, like when he got signed, hey, you already have Ilya Lyubushkin at home. His name is Alex Petrovic, and he costs $775,000. And we saw that in the playoffs. Like they chose this guy who's been playing in the AHL all season over Ilya Lyubushkin and Matt Dumba. So it's just like that's been the struggle: is how do we find the value that we need out of the right side. And so hopefully, Anil has decided to go with Lundqvist and keeping Lyubushkin, and hopefully that is a group that, I saw someone say, if Lundqvist and Bichsel take that next step, then your defensive core is looking really, really good. But if that problem continues to be that right side where your best player, is playing on his offhand, that's something that I think can be addressed. I'm hopeful that it'll be addressed at the trade deadline too, at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, because I'm looking at their depth chart right now for 25-26, and it looks like NHL players-wise, there's only two right-handed D, and you got Lundqvist and Lyubushkin, and
like I said, I know I sound like a greedy kid at Christmas, like saying like, hey, we need a better like defensive core when you have Haskin and Harley, Lindell is really good, Bichsel is looking really good. But truly what it comes down to is like that's the hole in the roster that like needs to be repaired. You have a franchise goaltender in Jake Ottinger. Your forward depth has been good for like 4 straight seasons now. It's just like how do we find the value we need out of that right side? Because what it came down to, as much as scoring was an issue and has been an issue, the deeper they get into the playoffs, it seems like their depth tends to dry up. The other problem is that against Edmonton, they were just getting scored on like constantly, essentially. Like they would go down, 2-0, 3-0. And once you're down, with the way Edmonton was playing this year, like once you're down to Edmonton, it's really hard to let them come back. Like it's kind of amazing that the Stars did come back against them in that game 1. But the rest of the series, they were not even close to being able to replicate something like that.
They got pretty much just the fire taken out of them in that series.
Yep.
I think they only won like 2 periods the whole series or something like that.
Yeah. No, we were, the series. It was actually kind of like that in Colorado too, where we were like, I think after game 3 or 4, we were leading the series, or after game 4 was tied, but after game 3, I guess we were leading the series, and we had only been like leading in game for like 10 minutes or something like that. Like it was crazy. So definitely, and again, some of that might be just that defensive system they were running. Like they were running this kind of man-on-man, which is already a very tiring system to have to do. And like in terms of the Stars, like defense, like Haskin and Harley are really good skaters. Lindell's a pretty decent skater, but the rest of those guys who are on that right side, especially, Ceci, Dumba, Lyubushkin, like these guys are no disrespect, they're not the best, skaters in the world. They'd probably be a little bit better off if they don't have to be chasing a guy, all around the ice essentially. So we'll see if they fix that, if that will help out too. But
yeah, I mean, it's just like kind of in the NHL, historically, right shot defensemen are so hard to find, especially good ones. Like it's just a massive hole, I feel like, on a lot of teams' rosters, and with the league like kind of going continuously growing, and we saw it go from 30 to 32 in the span of 5 years. That you're adding like 27 new like spots, right? Or no, you're adding like 54 new spots that these right shot D are going to get spread out even more thin. So and then with new CBA and more kind of potential opportunities for money, I think you might have 1, maybe 2 right shot defensemen per team in the next like 5 years if we keep moving on that route. But let me see. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was a couple more of those July 1st signings, specifically one of those signings, Radek Faksa coming back to Dallas after a stint in St. Louis. What were your thoughts on that, and where does your head lie? Just overall on Dallas's July 1st activity.
Yeah. So when they moved out Radek Faksa last year, all it came down to was it was a cap issue. He was still being paid, I think it was like over $5 million, because when they signed him to that contract, they knew that he was, he's always been this very defensive first forward. I think is one of the best fourth line like centers in the league, if not the best one, defensively. But there was always this hope that he had a little bit of offense, I think, during his development, and they were always hoping that would translate at the NHL level, and it really didn't, and started to degrade, obviously, as like time goes on. So they were, cap strong. They're like, okay, Fox is not doing what, $5 million says he should be doing. We're gonna have to move him out, so they move him out to St. Louis. And I think he did pretty decent there. I know he had a good playoffs too. He almost, before that miracle in Winnipeg, like he looked like he was gonna do another Game 7, game-winning goal. He scored to make it 2-1 against the Jets, and when he was in Dallas the year before, he had the game-winning goal against Vegas. I'll never. I don't know if you've ever seen like the clip of his reaction afterwards. Like he could not believe that he scored that. So definitely a fan favorite in Dallas. I think a lot of people are happy that he's back. I was a little bit. I was definitely critical of the signing just because it felt like, yes, Radek Fox is great to have on your fourth line, but once again, kind of with that Ilya Lyubushkin thing, like you already have Radek Fox. So in fact, you have like 3 of him essentially. You kept Colin Blackwell for league minimum. Oscar Beck is still on his entry level contract. He's very similar to Fox in the role he plays. And Sam Steele got an extension. I think it's $2.1 million. And he's a little bit more of a dynamic player, but he also is a really good fourth line center option. It felt like the Stars needed a like middle six left winger. And granted they were kind of money strapped with them being able to move out Dumba. They still have like $2 million. So if they hadn't signed Foxa and instead they had, wait till they moved out Dumba or maybe signed somebody else, they could have signed a forward in that middle six for like around $3 million. And that would have been a good kind of plug-in piece to have. There were a few that I had looked at kind of hoping that they had gone for, but sometimes it's just like who actually, wants to come to your city, what is all out there, who can get money elsewhere, those sorts of things. So I understand that. But they just kind of feel like Radek Foxa was kind of just going with something you already know and then just like paying a little bit more for it than what you already have at home was kind of how it felt. So definitely happy that he's back just as a player. But still kind of feels like there's a little bit to be desired there.
Right.
And that's kind of the summation of the whole offseason for Dallas is like there were some moves that we had been hoping that would get made. And again, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And it's not to say, I know there's a lot of fans, Stars fans are like notoriously kind of overreactive. A lot of fans are like, oh, this team's not making the playoffs, yada, yada, yada. It's like, that's not true. Well, hopefully it's not true. Like you have Mikko Rantanen, you have Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Wyatt Johnson, and in terms of even the players that you have for the long term, like if I go through the Stars, like you have like 2 or 3 different cores essentially of players who will be here for like the next 5 years at the very least. So I'm definitely, optimistic about where this team is headed. I think this year, just with how the rest of the Central ended up shaking out, I actually think the Stars look like one of the best teams in the division again, comparatively. So I definitely optimistic about the season. And I think it's just going to come down to like, hey, let's see where it goes. They've done everything. Jim Nill is kind of in this moment where, he ended up getting rid of DeBoer. And that kind of means, at this point, Gulasson is the guy he wanted. And it kind of means that Jim Nill has the team exactly as, he has built together. And if things don't go well, especially if they go drastically unwell, like they miss the playoffs or something, like he's the guy who the buck kind of has to stop at. So from that perspective, I am optimistic, but it'll be really interesting. It really feels like a kind of, hey, prove it year for Jim Nill, essentially. So.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's good. I think Dallas is always going to be like you said, like the next 4 or 5 years, they're always going to be a contender in the West. And I think it's really between Dallas, Vegas, Colorado, and Edmonton right now for kind of the gauntlet through the West. But, we'll see how that might change. Do you have anything else you wanted to touch on with the Stars?
No, that's everything I've got for them. I'll hit you with some questions now about the Canucks, and let's see where they're at, because I think they're in a bit of a different situation than Dallas is right now. So
yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. The main thing that I have with the Canucks, and the question that I have, is I look at the moves they made in the offseason, and I look at last season they had a fantastic season. I think that a lot of people kind of felt like they were overperforming a little bit, but they had a great season. They almost take down Edmonton in that series, which completely changes.
God.
I feel like it's one of those moments that changes the course of like NHL history, the way we think about it.
Changes,
but it feels like there was that regression this year, and the thing that I'm a little bit not baffled by, but just a little bit confused is that it feels like with their offseason moves that I don't really see yet how this team has made a change in the direction. It kind of feels like they're kind of stagnated here. And I don't know if that's something that Canucks fans are feeling too, or if that's just me as an outside observer looking in.
So, yeah, I think people have a little bit of definitely an opinion on the Evander Kane signing, right? You go from just the fiasco we had in the season with JT Miller and the Elias Pettersson drama that really superseded the entire season. Like that became the focal point of the year, even after it was over. So you think after that, you'd want to like calm things down, but then we bring Evander Kane, known as being one of the biggest divas in the NHL. But at least in his media day and like his first day there, right? Again, like you said, Gulletson was saying all the right things. Kane was saying all the right things. And so, he's coming home. He's from Vancouver. Hopefully, he'll settle down a little bit. And I think he can be a spark plug. Like he can be very good. And I think that if you get him on a line with, Pettersson, and then they can be successful together, you got to test it out and see, but it could be a good fit. And this is a prove it year for Kane. If he doesn't have a good year, you could very well be seeing a retirement post at the end of the season, right? Because he needs to either get paid or he's probably done if he doesn't perform. So I think, I think there's a little bit of upside there. But I also don't love that we kind of handed Edmonton a 4th-round pick when they had zero leverage. I think we could have probably gotten away with less. I know it's just a 4th-round pick, but it's the same 4th-round pick that we obtained in the Vasily Podkolzin trade. So it's essentially a 1-for-1 deal, Podkolzin for Kane. And I think if you think about it like that, I'm okay with it. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the team doesn't seem like it improved. So just kind of off the top of my head, Hugh Sutter on the way out, this 25 goal scorer who admittedly was shooting, kind of lights out. I think he shot 19% shooting percentage this year and has got a career 13%. So that's probably not a attainable goal for the rest of his years, which is okay. Ideally we would have liked to have Sutter stay because right now kind of our second line center position is a little bit questionable. Like we went from having 3 years ago Pettersson, Miller, and Horvat down the middle, like holy shit, like that is probably one of the best center depth in the NHL, to Pettersson, concussion threat, Hedl, and then now we're looking at maybe Atu Ratu as our third line center, which is like, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. But here's what I have to say is that I think the difference, the big thing that the Canucks did this past year, not necessarily the offseason, but this past year, was they really revamped that blue line. And you look at, we had Noah Juulsen play. Let me see how many games the fucking guy played. We had Noah Juulsen play in, oh my goodness, I can't find him right now. But too many games. We had Noah Juulsen playing 35 games for the club this year, which is, I think there was a funny stat on Twitter that was like the Canucks were like 21 and like 5 when he didn't play, and they were like 11 and like something stupid when he did. But the course of the defense really changed. That was our biggest weakness coming into the season this year, and I think coming out of the season, it's one of our biggest strengths. Like I would say we have maybe not elite, but I would say we probably have a top 10 defensive core in the NHL. And when I say that, I'm thinking about, okay, so you have Hughes on the left side, you have Hronek to pair with him. I think that right there is, again, one of the top tandems in the show. Yeah, I think that's a really good kind of start there. Let me make sure I got everything pulled up so I can think through this right. But we have Tyler Myers, 35-year-old. I think when he was making $6 million, he was worthless. Everyone hated him. When he's making $3 million, he's perfect for that amount. He can score a goal every now and again, and he's relatively stay at home. His mistakes don't stand out as much when he's making $3 million. And I think he really stepped up this year when you saw guys like Quinn Hughes out. I mean, he played a lot of minutes. And I'm okay with him being, playing kind of that, I guess, like bottom 4 defense. There's only 6 defensemen, but kind of transitioning between, because Tyler Myers is a right-handed guy, right? That can be on that third pairing or the second pairing, and I'm okay with him playing, 16 to 20 minutes a night based on what we need. And I think he's serviceable there. I think it's a good spot for him to be. And then you look at Marcus Pettersson, who we brought in at the deadline. We moved out some of the picks that we got from the JT Miller trade, and then we were able to obtain Marcus Pettersson. Marcus Pettersson, he's slow. He's really fucking slow, but defensively, he's a huge upgrade on what we had going into the year. And he's a leader. He's vocal in the room. That was one of the big things coming in. He's another Pettersson, which is huge for our Pettersson stock. And he's just coming in, and that's an improvement on the back end. So now you look at our top 3D, and you go, you got Hughes, you got Hronik, you got Pettersson, and that's a pretty strong, top 3 defenseman. And then you kind of throw Myers in there, and it could be better, but it could be a lot worse. And I'm okay with that. And then we have a big surprise kind of that came in. Elias Pettersson, DPD, came in.
Yep.
Elias Pettersson played. Let's see. I'm looking. I got his EP pulled up right now, but it looks like he played 38 games in Abbotsford this year, and this was his first full year in North America, right? So he's coming over from playing in Sweden, and on the bigger ice. And a lot of times, the biggest complaint for these European defensemen in particular is they come over and they don't really have the physicality to play at the level that they play at in North America. But that was not an issue at all. I mean, he came over, he had 13 points in 38 games in the AHL. Abbotsford was a wagon this year, so it was probably a good place to help him develop. But 13 points in 38 games, the guy was never, he wasn't drafted to be an offensive defenseman. He was a 3rd-round pick, big body. He's 6'3", 209. And he surprised. I mean, he got called up, played in a couple games when we were really kind of decimated on D. And he proved himself. He proved himself as a valuable asset, and he never got sent back down. He played 28 games in the NHL this year, and he is going to be our bona fide, left-handed D on the bottom on that 3rd pairing. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see him get minutes in the top 4, just because of the development he's shown has been superb. And I think his trade value has increased a lot, just because of what he was able to do. I mean, he's not a liability on defense. And as a 21-year-old European playing in his first season in North America, the upside is incredible, and I'm really happy with what he's been able to do.
That kind of feels like, they say especially about contending teams, that it's always really important to have those young players that you can bring in either in their rookie year or, rookie plus 1 year, and have them make an impact, especially when they're on those entry-level contracts. And it feels like, I was looking at the signings the Canucks did, and I know that they didn't keep everybody from that Abbotsford, cup-winning team, but they kept a lot of those kind of young pieces you could see maybe translate into some NHL upside. So is that something that you think that the Canucks will have to lean into this year, or is it kind of, hey, keep those guys in Abbotsford, when we call them up, we'll call them up, or what do you think is going to go down there?
No, I think 100% we're going to see some of those guys see time, at least in the beginning of the year. I think training camp's going to be big because we have I'm looking at kind of like the 4th line right now. So the top 6 is pretty much kind of set in stone, right? You're going to have DeBrusk, PD, Besser, Kane, Hedel, and Garland in some kind of order in that top 6. And then the bottom 6 is really where you're going to have a lot of kind of that variability. Kiefer Sherwood is going to be an NHL player for the whole season. You're probably going to see Dakota Joshua, Drew O'Connor, and Hoglander up there for most of the year. But the thing is, I just think that we have a lot of talent down there, especially on the center side. Like Max Sasson was really good for us in Abbotsford, like a top player in Abbotsford. You got Arshdeep Bains, who has been good. He didn't prove much at the NHL level last year, but he was a really important piece of that Abbotsford team this past season. So I think training camp's going to be really important because right now, it doesn't seem like, if you look at their lineup, it doesn't seem like there's space for those guys to be consistent players. But Teddy Bluger has been a consistent piece for the last 3 years, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Sasson or Baines come up and really prove it in training camp and get that spot over him to start the season.
Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of, a little bit thing is with the CBA, they're kind of canceling those paper transactions where a team like the Canucks kind of abused it, throwing guys down and picking them back up. So that might also change the strategy of, that might also change the strategy of like how long guys are up for and how many games they play. So it could be more of an opportunity for those guys to prove it. But I would say the Canucks do have a solid set of NHLers right now. So it's going to be, they're going to need to prove it in training camp, or they're not going to be in the NHL to start the year.
And I guess a similar guy in that camp, I think this might be a pretty decent storyline in Vancouver, is with the goaltending tandem with Artur Shilov, who had an excellent year in the AHL, even when he was playing as y'all's playoff goaltender during that run. Like, he played really well, I thought. Last year against Nashville and against Edmonton. But I think I saw that they extended oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name right now. Extended y'all's franchise goalie, and then they also extended Lankinen as well during the season. So it feels like, the way I look at it, that it looks like Shilov is kind of getting the short end of the stick there and getting a little bit pushed out, which would be pretty surprising to me if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, so I think another thing to even kind of bury the hatchet is they drafted a goalie in the second or third round. So I think it was the second round. They picked up Alexei Medvedev, and then they signed him. They signed him to an entry-level contract just like a couple days ago. So, yeah, it really does seem like Silovs is on the way out. And I think as much as that is terrible and it sucks right now, I think it may be maybe the best option, because it took me a little bit of time to kind of wrap my head around that, because Shilovs is a proven goalie at the international level, bronze medal with Latvia in the World Championships a couple years ago, like 5 shutouts in 16 wins for the Abbotsford Canucks this postseason, but he hasn't necessarily proved his NHL worth at this point in his career. And he's had a couple of stints. Looking at him here, he played. He only played 10 NHL games this year. He posted an .861, and he was 2-6-1 in those games. But to be fair to him, the Canucks defense was awful to start the year, right? So that definitely plays a factor. But then again, like, you look at the playoff run he had in 23-24, he was. We needed him to step up. He stepped up, but he had an .898, which isn't terrible. It's not awful. Canucks went 5-5. If the Canucks have Thatcher Demko, and this may just be me being delusional, but I think we win that series. I think that a big criticism of Shilovs was his ability to track pucks coming in from far out. And Demko is having a Vezina caliber season that year. And we lose him, in that Nashville series, and that. So basically, he hasn't proven himself fully at the NHL level, and he is 24 years old. He'll be 25 in March, and I think that there are Lankinen and Demko, if they can stay healthy, is going to be a really good tandem for many years. And it just does. There's not a lot of space for Shilovs to come in. But interestingly enough, I was listening to the Canucks conversation podcast hosted by like some guys in the media, and they were saying they don't think Shilovs has a lot of trade value. Even with the Abbotsford Canucks winning the championship, like, they don't think that he could command even like a third or second or third round pick. Like, they think he's in that 4th round pick territory just because of what I said. Him not having proven it in the NHL. It's like a team like Edmonton, who wants to improve their goaltending situation, how do they know that if they go out and trade for Shilovs, it's going to be anything better than Stuart Skinner? You have no idea, right? Yeah. So that's kind of where I stand on it. It sucks because I really love him and he's got a great personality. He's a marketable player, but it just doesn't make sense for the Canucks right now to keep him around, because
Yeah, that was the team that I went to. Was like, oh, maybe Edmonton would, because I know they were kind of in on the the Gibson sweepstakes, and then Detroit picks them up. They're like seventh goaltender in the last 3 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So that would be a team that I could see him ending up on. And then I do just feel like I'm surprised to hear that a lot of the people in the Canucks media don't feel like he has that value, just because I feel like teams are always there's always at least one, if not two or three teams that are like, it feels like they're like that goaltender away, like even Philly, and I don't think Philly is a goaltender away from like being a playoff contender, but they're a team that like their goaltending was like a huge problem this year. And I think they signed I think it was Vladar or something like that. Like it feels like they could be someone that maybe has interest in Shilovs too. So that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, and I think we'll see. I think the Canucks will try and hold on to him for as long as possible. Like they're not going to try and move him out. They're not going to try and move him out now. With kind of the paper. So like I think back in like 2013, 2014, when the Canucks moved on from Roberto Luongo, they moved him back to Florida. They got Jacob Markstrom back in that trade. And Markstrom had a great season with at the time, I think it was with Utica.
Utica, yeah.
Might have been the Chicago Wolves. I don't remember when the Canucks AHL franchise changed, but he had a really good year in the AHL that first year he came over. And the next year, the Canucks were still running with a different tandem, and they were able to kind of sneak him down through waivers, send him back to the AHL, and then they held on to him, and then he became the starting goalie for a couple of years. So we'll see what the Canucks do. Lankinen has a no-move clause on his contract that he just signed, so Lankinen's not going anywhere. And Demko just signed that extension, so it doesn't seem like Demko's going anywhere. Yeah. So I really don't see the space for him at the NHL level, and I don't think he's an AHL goalie anymore at this point. Yeah. So I think something will happen with him. I don't think it's going to happen soon. The Canucks want to feel it out and try and get as much value for him as possible, like send him to a team like Philly or maybe Edmonton if they decide that they want go that route. But yeah, that's kind of where I think it stands with the Sheilov situation, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of the fact of the matter.
And speaking of trades, and I'm kind of glad you didn't bring up the Jason Robertson trade rumors, because I'll go on a rant for like an hour being upset about those rumors. But I did see, and I will bring up, I have seen kind of just kind of inklings of like maybe Quinn Hughes wants to move on from Vancouver, which I would be kind of shocked to see that happen. But the only reason I bring it up is because I don't remember who it was in that press conference. I don't think it was the GM. If it was, that's terrible. I think it was the owner. I could be wrong. But I remember hearing something about, they asked him about an extension. Obviously he's now eligible for an extension, I think, this year. And, he says, he might want to play with his brothers. And like, dude, when I heard that, I was like, you can't even be like giving any fuel to the idea of like, we're going to trade, our franchise player. So is that like something that could happen, or is that just kind of, people kind of just talking out of the sides of their mouth?
So that was Jim Rutherford. That's the president of hockey operations that let that go in a fucking interview, which is, that guy is just kind of notorious since he's been in Vancouver for saying whatever he wants. And I think that there is a certain level of like, shut up that you need to have when you're in these front office situations. I don't think there's a lot of base to that. I think the way I interpreted it was not that we're going to trade Hughes, but more like sending out like maybe we could go out and get Jack and Jack and Luke. But regardless, stupid thing to say. And here's what I would say is I think that the Canucks care a lot about what Quinn Hughes wants, and they ask him what he thinks on a lot of decisions. Right? They Hronik is a guy that he really liked playing with. They signed him to an extension, right? I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of these big extensions they just sent out, Demko, Besser, Garland, those are all American guys, guys that Hughes is really close with, right? So they're making sure that they're bringing back guys that Hughes wants to be there and guys Hughes likes. I think in the Pettersson-Miller drama, the question was, okay, like who do we move on from, right? It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of who. And PD and Hughes have a really good relationship, and so they moved on from Miller. And I think they made a lot of decisions that really adhere to what Quinn wants and what he likes. And I think that there's only so much you can do, but I think Hughes wants to stay in Vancouver. I think he also wants to play with his brothers, but I think he wants to be like a legacy guy in Vancouver that if they're able to, they need to win. If they're gonna not be good at hockey, if they're gonna miss the playoffs again, his contract is up in it's up at the end of 26-27. So they got
they got
2 more years of him at 7.85. Probably one of the best value contracts in the NHL.
Yeah.
If they're not playoff contending, if they're not like making it past the first round within the next 2 years, could totally see Quinn walking. And the Canucks cannot let that shit happen. Number one, they either need to win or they need to move him for something huge. And so it pains me to say that, but there is potential for Quinn Hughes to leave Vancouver because you cannot let a guy who is that good be wasted away in a place like this. And he wants to win, and he's not going to do it in Vancouver if Vancouver's not winning. So, yeah.
And you mentioned Brock Besser coming back, which I was I think a lot of people were surprised that he ended up returning. How did you feel about that extension? I was wondering, I know he had a little bit of a down year from his season, the season before. And I did feel like the cap hit, initially I had a little bit of sticker shock to it, but like just thinking about as cap goes up, that's actually going to be it should be a pretty good value for him in the long term. Were you happy about them bringing back Besser and him sticking around? I know he said he wanted to stay in Vancouver, was kind of always a good thing to hear for any city really, but especially for cities that sometimes get a reputation of guys not wanting to be there. But what did you think about that?
Yeah. Well, so Besser obviously wanted to stay, and I think there was a lot of like just some shit that like stuff that you heard in the media, late in the season, like even like at the deadline, he was like a big question mark: is Besser going to get moved? There was just a lot of stuff around him, and then he also came out and just mentioned like how he wasn't super happy with how the talks have been going with the GM. So all of that stuff, it kind of like once you got to the end of the year and he wasn't signed like on the extension kind of opening, you just kind of thought, okay, well, he's gonna go, and we can use the money that we would have given to Besser to try and sign Sutter or try and sign one of those kind of blue chip guys, in the free agent market. But I think the strategy shifted on July 1st. That's what I think. I think the plan was never to re-sign him. They were going to let him walk, and they did. He went to July 1st, and the deadline to re-sign him and have exclusive rights to him passed, and then they got him after that. I think what happened was I don't think they would have signed Evander Kane or traded for Evander Kane if they thought they were going to retain Brock Besser, because I think Evander Kane was going to be brought in as a replacement. And then they got to July 1st and they realized, okay, well, are we going to overpay Granlund in free agency to come here? Like, because that's really the last center outside of Pete Sutter that you could bring back. And then I think they got to July 1st and they saw what was still available and they said, we have this amount of money, but there's nobody on this market that we want to give this money to. So let's bring back Besser. And I think that's what happened. And I'm totally okay with that because, okay, you mentioned the cap hit, and I think you're right. I think 7.25 million is a little bit of sticker shock. You're a little bit like, okay, that's pretty big. But when you look at Besser and you look at what he's been able to do in the NHL, this guy is a perennial 50-point scorer with a couple years being, that season where he was playing with Miller, he scored 73 points. He's gonna get you 50 points. He's gonna score 25 goals. Like that's his MO. Like he's only had one or like a couple of years where he hasn't scored 25 goals in his NHL career. So that's you're. I don't think it's terrible value, and I also think with the cap going up, the percentage of percentage of the cap allocated to Besser is going to remain roughly the same. It's actually pretty close to what it was when he signed his original deal. So I'm not super worried about that. It's just the question marks with Besser are, can he be a play driver on his own line, right? Because when he was playing with Miller was the play driver. Besser finished the pucks. Besser was the finisher. And that's fine. But, you're going to need Besser to take a step a little bit. At 7.25, you can't just be kind of riding coattails. You need to make some of your own, create some of your own offense. And so I think that's the biggest question mark. But I think I'm really happy with that signing. Like, I think you're not going to find anybody in free agency to replace Besser for any less than you'd be paying Besser. So bringing back a guy who's got 500 plus games played with the city, has, been just kind of a staple of Canucks hockey through thick and thin through the last few years. I really appreciate that. I love bringing guys back. He's had a couple of bridge deals that are always tough to navigate as a player. So seeing him sign the long-term deal, I'm happy for him, and I think it's good for the team.
Awesome. And I guess my last question for you about Vancouver, and we kind of started this with the Stars too. We talked about the Stars look like they should be top team in the division, maybe even top team in the West, somewhere in that range. But with Vancouver, my question for you is, where do you see them kind of finishing this year? How did you feel about the offseason in general? My worry is that not even with, I think there is an opening for them in the Pacific. I think LA could end up taking a bit of a step back this year, and Vancouver could creep into that top 3 spot. But my worry is if they're, fighting for a wild card kind of spot, the Central is just it's like ridiculously stacked. And so my worry is that they end up being like, either team number 17 or something like that like just misses that playoff mark, or they end up being like even worse, like they're above, they're in the top 16 of the league, but they're just outside the 8 in the West or something like that. Do you think they end up, kind of getting back to where we saw them, a year ago, or is it kind of more kind of just stuck in this mud sort of thing?
I think we're not going to see them get back to where they were a year ago. They're not going to be like leading the Pacific Division. Not next year, I don't think, because I think Vegas, Edmonton, really just those 2 teams. Vegas and Edmonton are going to be the top dogs in the Pacific Division. They will be for a long, long time. So every other team in the division is fighting for 3rd place, which sucks because that means there's only one guaranteed spot there for the Pacific. And so when I'm looking at the division, San Jose, obviously they got a little bit better, right? They can pick up Misa. Like, they're not going to be as bottom of the barrel. They're going to win a few more games, steal a few more points. They're not making the playoffs. Anaheim, they made a couple moves this summer. They got Chris Kreider. Their younger guys probably make a step. They moved on from Zegras. Maybe that'll change some stuff up there. But I still don't think they made enough moves to where they're going to be making some big splashes.
I agree.
LA, so I think they're still going to be out of the playoffs. You look at Los Angeles, and I think I agree with you. They kind of got older and slower on their defense. But they were a pretty good team last year. But I don't think that they're going to be a team that completely falls off the face of the map, right? Like, they're not going to go from like 3. Let me pull up the NHL standings for this past season.
I think they were actually number 2, right? They had the home ice against Edmonton in that series.
So let's NHL standings 25. So I think you're right. So Kings were 2. Granted, Darcy Kuemper was playing out of his mind. I think he had a .920 save percentage.
He was sneakily good. It felt like.
Let me verify some of that stuff. Yeah, but if you're looking at all the things that went right for LA last year, right? Darcy Kuemper plays 50 games with a .922 save percentage. Let me pull up. He wasn't as great in the playoffs, but
their goals against, I think, were at least top 5, if not, they might have been number 2 after Winnipeg.
Right.
They had such a good defensive year, or year defensively rather. So I remember I actually had them going to the conference final. I was like, dude, I'm riding the LA high. I was like, we're getting Winnipeg, LA. It's going to be a slog fest. It'll be awesome.
Right.
And then they kind of blew it against Edmonton.
They lost Gavrikov, which is I thought may have been one of their top defense. And I think Spence left too as well.
Yeah,
right?
Spence, they traded him out. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're losing Gavrikov and Spence, who I would say are 2 of your top 4 defensemen, and then you pick up,
Cody C.
Yeah, you pick up Cody Ceci. So I think their defense gets worse, and their goaltending. I don't think their goaltending is going to get like worse, but I think it's difficult.
At least regresses a little bit, probably.
Yeah. I mean, Kuemper is 35, and he's 35 years old. It's he had a pretty tough year with the Capitals before coming to LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about the consistency of Kuemper. So I think that LA could be. I don't think they're going to be. I think they'll be fighting for that third spot in the Pacific.
Yeah.
That's where I think they'll be. I don't think they're going to, be winning 48 games in the West. They're not winning 48 games again. At least that's my opinion. So, looking at the standings, then you have, and I think with Utah coming in, no, never mind. So, looking at the standings, you have Golden Knights and Oilers at the top two. Kings fighting for a spot. The Flames.
They're so confusing to me. I don't even know what to think about Calgary because I thought they were going to be a bottom 5 team this year, and they were like almost made the playoffs. So
yeah, they had 96 points. Like they were one of those teams that was like they got kind of gypped out of making the playoffs. Yeah. I think the Flames is another team where like I need to look at their roster. Hold on, let me pull it up, and then also see what did they do anything this summer that was like
they kind of did something kind of similar to Vancouver, to a lot of teams where they just kind of brought back a lot of their guys that have been doing relatively well for them. Like I don't even have that they brought in anyone. When I was doing my notes, I kind of looked at NHL talent specifically rather than just kind of guys who are on the bubble. Like I don't think they brought in anyone notably NHL like talent. Like they just kind of re-signed a bunch of dudes. They still have to re-sign Zari. I think is a big one. They have to get that contract figured out. And they only really lost in terms of like top tier NHL talent. I say top tier just in that NHL range, consistent 80-something game player. Mantha and Vladar. And Vladar is their backup goalie. So it's just like I don't know how to feel about them. I don't know if this is a team that is once again fighting for a playoff. I don't know if they take a regression. Maybe they take another step if Wolf has an insane year again. Like I don't know how to feel about them.
See, that's the big thing is like Wolf was unbelievable this past year.
Yeah.
And like I just don't know how sustainable that is. Like I'm not saying that he's not great. Like he really was like he had consistent numbers that were unbelievable in the AHL for like a couple of years in a row. But can you rely on that? Can you say like this is like how it's going to go next year? So I'm looking at their stats right now for 24-25. I don't know, man. Like they have 15 million in cap space right now. So that makes me believe that they're going to do something. Maybe not. Maybe they just sit there. But that makes me feel like they're going to go out and try and, test the trade market. But I think Calgary, looking at their stuff here right now. Fuck. I don't know. I think Calgary's below LA in the depth chart. I think Vancouver is going to be better than Calgary this year.
Yeah.
That's my hot take there. And I think Seattle did not get better.
Yeah, I think Seattle is in the McKenna sweepstakes. I'm not gonna lie.
Seattle just kind of like keeps adding like middle six forwards, and I don't know what that's gonna do for them.
Well, so on Seattle, real quick. So that was something I've been thinking about. I remember when the Stars played Seattle in that second round, in I guess it was that'd have been 22-23. Is that that playoff? Yeah.
It would have been their inaugural season.
Yeah, then it was their second season. It was their second season that they made the playoffs. Because first season they were disastrous. But they like had this thing where, like you said, like they're just kind of all middle six forwards with their entire lineup. And in the playoffs, not only was Grubauer was playing really well, but they would just score, and that's how they beat Colorado. They literally just would score whenever anybody, hey, we need a goal. Someone just goes out there and scores. And against Dallas, they got into kind of a shooting match that entire 7-game series as well. And I don't know if like they kind of felt like, hey, maybe this is an identity we can, adopt. Like we just get all these guys who like are good depth pieces and they'll just like show up when we need them to. Which if that is like, if it was a purposeful choice, I think is a little bit of a mistake because the expectation should be that with a kind of blip. You should expect a regression, I feel like, from that amount of scoring depth with those guys. So it just feels like they're constantly almost needing like a kind of superstar forward. Yeah, and I think they hope that Shane Wright would be that, and he hasn't been that
Matty
yet.
Beniers took a step back.
Yeah, Matty Beniers too. Yeah. And so like they have pieces I like there, but they don't have it hasn't come together yet. And I feel like adding Mason Marchment isn't the like change that's going to bring that. Like no disrespect to him, but
yeah. So I'll say this. I think the Canucks make the playoffs next year as a third team in the Pacific.
Okay.
That's what I think.
I like it.
And
I like it.
because I think if they don't, they're not making the playoffs. Because I don't see the Wild, like Jets, Stars, Avalanche. I'll bet you in some way those are the top three teams in the division in the Central
that feels
again.
Right to me.
And then the Predators. I don't know. I feel like last year was extra shit for them. I think there's a way that they can be better with the same team. Utah is really intriguing.
They're
going to be
really high on Utah.
They're going to be good. I could see Utah and the Blues competing for that, final wild card spot. I do think all five. I think there will be 2 wild cards in the Central. So I think I'm going to say Canucks make it in the third spot in the Pacific, and I think we're going to see Jets, Stars, Avalanche, Wild, and Utah out of the Central for the West. That's what I'm going to say.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. The West was so weird this offseason because like Winnipeg still has a lot of cap space, but they have to re-sign a bunch of guys. Like I know Velarde is like a big name that they still haven't. He's an RFA. They haven't locked down that contract.
They took him to arbitration. He's going to arbitration.
Okay, they're going to arbitration. And I know they lost Ehlers, which I think is a little bit, you want to try to make that up in the aggregate, but that's just how it is. Dallas kind of, I wouldn't say drastically improved, but they're kind of just, they have Rantanen now for a full season, which could be a difference maker. I thought that Colorado honestly has gotten kind of worse. Like they kept Nelson, which I kind of get them doing. They have
a big deal too.
Yeah, kind of. That was. Matt Duchene's getting 4.5 and Brock Nelson's getting $7 million. So just kind of interesting there for them to give up Rantanen and then kind of use the money they would have spent on Rantanen to keep Nelson and then some other like depth pieces. But that's what the direction they wanted to do. And then like Minnesota, like really for Minnesota, it's just can they be healthy? Because like at the beginning of the season, if you remember, they were like insane. It looked like they were going to be competing for that number 1 spot in the West, and then. Injuries happen, kind of start to regress from there. I know they've been really, to me, weirdly hesitant on keeping Marco Rossi. Like he's been on the trade block, it seems like, since they left the playoffs. But St. Louis, I like how St. Louis looks. Utah, I really like how they look. Like it feels like there's so many teams in the Central that could like take a step or just be competing for those playoff spots. Like I don't know what to make of it yet. So
yeah, it's pretty scary, especially as like a bottom feeder team in the Pacific this past year. But the Central is scary. Like I think the NHL, like the Western Conference is way scarier than the Eastern Conference. Like the East, there's like 3 teams in the East that even like. Okay, maybe I'm over exaggerating. I think like Florida's gonna be good again, right? They're gonna be contenders again. I think Montreal could be very scary.
Yes.
They got a really young group that could take that step this year. Toronto, I have no idea what that's going to look like with Marner out.
Yeah, it feels like they should be, it feels like they should be a little bit worse. But at the same time, it's like Toronto, and they're always good in the regular season. Like that's their whole thing. It's like they're the Dallas Cowboys of the NHL. Like that's what they are.
Yeah, and then with the Lightning, like they've been good. You can never count out Vasilevsky, Kucherov, Hedman, but like they just did not look the same in the playoffs as they have in the past.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think that they're gonna like take any big step backs in the regular season, but I just. I'm not sure if they're, a big contender at this stage anymore. Like, I don't know if Jake Gensel puts you over the top, right? To be their top there. And then I think the Capitals are going to regress a lot. I
agree. Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to be what they were the past year. The Hurricanes adding Ehlers could see another big year. I mean, the Hurricanes are kind of just like consistently in the top of the Eastern Conference. So I wouldn't
really
expect
like their
to see.
Offseason.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect to see any big regressions there. And then I don't know, Devils, Blue Jackets, Rangers. Those are all big question marks to me. I have no idea what they're going to do. Granted, I'm a lot less well versed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, the way I view the East, and they've kind of been in this situation for a little bit. I know there was a season, it was a few years ago, where like we knew what the Eastern playoff setup was like almost halfway through the season. There was like in each division, there was like 4 good teams and 4 just atrocious teams.
Yeah.
And then since then, it's been like that's the conference that goes down to like the last game because there's like 6 different teams all fighting for one playoff spot. And there's a lot of teams in the East that like they need to take a step this year. And so far, all the ones that I feel like need to do that, it feels like are the ones that are least likely to do that. Like the Red Wings have been, 1 point from a playoff spot for like 3 years now. And people in Detroit, like even, family members I have that are Red Wings fans are like, they're out on the Iser plan. They're like, this is never, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Buffalo, like, what do you even have to say about Buffalo? Has just been, 13 years, is it, without playoffs? Like,
it's the longest playoff drought in like Big Four history, or no, maybe not history, but like active
in like right now, yeah. And then like Ottawa, I think they did take the step this year, but I look at their roster and I'm like, ooh, with how tough that Atlantic division is, like I don't know if they're going to be able to like build off of that. Like I hope they do, but it's rough. And like Columbus has now kind of come out of nowhere, like especially with just how horrible like the circumstances were around the team at the beginning of last season with Johnny Gaudreau passing away. Yeah. Like for them to be, they were 1 or 2 wins away from playoff contention. Like they had such an impressive season to me, and I think they could, hopefully keep building off of that. And I say all those teams, and then I look at the one that actually has done, the most, I think, this season and this off season. I think I'm still debating who I'm going to crown, that off season champion, but like Montreal has just had such a great string. Like they have done the rebuild exceptionally. Like it's very impressive to me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then that Dobson trade that they made, I think bringing in Dobson, if you're a team that's looking to kind of be successful in the next 5 years, like you don't need the 16th and 17th overall picks. Like don't need them at all. So I think letting those go, great decision making for Montreal, and I think Dobson's going to fit into that lineup. He might not be a 70-point guy in Montreal because he's not like going to be the guy at all times on the defensive end.
He doesn't need to be the guy, yeah.
No, he doesn't need to be the guy, and I think that is what's really going to help them out. Like Montreal is oh man, I'm pulling up their lineup right now, but just off the top of my head, you got Caulfield, you got Suzuki, you've got Hudson coming up the line. They're just like, oh man, and they've got a lot more pieces that I didn't even say there.
It's scary because a lot of their, like they have, like I said, I feel like they've done the rebuild perfectly. Like, they kind of go on that Cinderella run in that, the COVID shortened season, where they come out of the Canadian division. That was like such an interesting like setup. And, Carey Price obviously kind of has career ending injury after that. And then they're just kind of just in the tank completely. But like they've done good to like recoup assets and like trust their young players too. Like I remember hearing about when they brought in Martin St. Louis. He said something to the players about like, hey, we're not, we know what we are. We're not trying to win and get into the playoffs this year. We are going to get better. Essentially, it's like that's the mindset. Like we are going to work on all of our skills and just get better. And you look at their guys, like you mentioned, their forward core, and they're such dynamic players, and they are also on such good contracts. Like a lot of those guys are not signed to like huge big money deals, and they've already been extended for the next 5 years at least.
Nick Suzuki's making 7.8 until 29-30, and that guy had 87 points this past year.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's like it's and when you do that, when you're able to like lock up your core like that, and have them at such like good contracts, like really, I feel like in terms of like how teams build to be like a Stanley Cup contender, like usually what it comes down to is like you have your core, absolutely. And you want to have that locked down to good enough value so that you have additional money to spend on like those depth pieces. Like, you bring in the Brad Marchands for that playoff run, like that sort of situation. And Montreal has put themselves in a situation to do that. And obviously they're young, so sometimes that can be a thing that's tough, especially going through those playoffs. But like if they end up competing for maybe even that third spot in the division, or just being kind of a solid wild card team, like this is a year or two where they don't even have that much pressure either, because they're still they still are so young. They make the playoffs and then they can kind of just go on a run and keep gaining that experience. And dude, I don't know. I've seen people talk about like, obviously it feels like the Oilers are like the team to break the Canadian like Stanley Cup drought. But I remember, I think it's a THG, the hockey guy, like he's always talked about. He's like, I think it's Montreal. Like I think Montreal is the one who does it in like 6 years or something like that. So
the biggest question mark for me with Montreal is like I think they've got so many pieces coming up. Like Slavkovsky is just getting better and better and better every year. Kirby Dach, like coming off a couple bad injuries, like he, if he can get back to form, that's another top 6 forward that you just kind of pop up out of nowhere. But it's kind of my question mark would be in the goaltending realm. I know they have like Dobbs coming up, young guy. I think he kind of was the primary back. I mean, he played 16 games this year, and he played well in those 16 games. But they leaned super heavily, like probably one of the most games played out of goalies in the NHL this year was on Samuel Montembeault, who, he was selected to play for Team Canada. Didn't play, but he was selected to play for Team Canada. Probably will be an Olympic selection goalie. 902 save percentage in 62 games. I guess I don't really have a great gauge on how good he is. Like he's been their guy for multiple years now. Like he played 21-22, 22-23. Like the last 4 years he's been their guy. And he's always posted like above 900. Take away the 21-22 season where they were abysmal, but. I don't know. Do you know anything more on this guy? Like it seems like a question mark to me, but they trusted him. So
I hadn't heard much about him until like this year, and from what I saw, he was impressing people. And I don't know if it's so much of he was stand out, or if it was just the team as a whole like got better. And if you have people who can now score goals for you, that obviously helps. If you have a little bit better defense, you have a Calder Trophy winning defenseman on your team, like. That is definitely helpful to bring in this year. So I don't know where they're at on him. It might be kind of a more like, hey, we need to keep feeling this out. Like he might be just like one of those type of goalies who like kind of like how Stuart Skinner can be sometimes, where like he's not like he's never gonna shock you, but at the same time, like if he's playing in a system that kind of helps him out and he can just be consistent enough that could be something that they can lean on. So
Yeah, you're right. Another thing that's kind of crazy about them is they got Logan Maloya coming up through the system. I know that kid he's been like kind of subjected to some questionable stuff in like Sweden. But if we take away that and we just look at the hockey side, which typically isn't the best thing to do, but just strictly looking at statistics, he's been a bit of a monster in the AHL for Laval. When you look at that defensive core, you got Hudson, you got Dobson, and then you bring up Malloy, who seems like he could be. Oh wait, he's no longer on the Canadiens. Okay.
Oh yeah, he got traded. He got traded in the Bolduc trade, right? Yeah.
He was moved. Okay. All right. Well, let me just kill that point. Never mind.
Well, I mean, we can kind of segue off of that. Like they picked up Zach Bolduc from the Blues in that trade, and I've seen some people talk about that. Like they were kind of shocked that St. Louis made that trade. Apparently, a lot of people were impressed by Bolduc. I don't know too much about him, but they also have Demidov. Demidov should get a full year in the NHL this year, I think. Unless he doesn't do well at camp or something, gets moved to the A.
He looked good in the playoffs.
Yeah. So there's just so much like. Like I said, just so much young talent around that team. Like I really am liking. I don't think they're going to be like winning the Stanley Cup next year. Maybe I'm wrong, but they feel like a team that could really take a very impressive step and like could be a little bit of a shock to that Atlantic division. That's kind of been like, besides Boston, having fallen off a cliff now. Like for a while, it's been like the top teams are like Tampa, some combination of like Tampa, Toronto, Florida, something like that. So. Maybe Montreal sneaks in there. It's like number 3 or, who knows, maybe even higher. I don't know. So.
Yeah. Bolduc was a half a point a game player for St. Louis this past year. 36 points, 19 goals in 72 games. That's another guy that you bring into that young system with a coach that has been doing really well at developing these young players. I mean, he's 22. He was a first round pick in 21. I mean, that could be really, really positive, but. Yeah, Montreal, big riser. A lot of stock placed on Montreal for this next season. I think
100%.
If things work correctly for them, we could really be seeing some more Canadian teams excelling here in the playoffs. So, Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the Islanders for a second here.
Yeah.
Islanders were on the other side of that Dobson trade. They did the sign and trade, signed Dobson up for 9.5 by 8, and sent him over to Montreal. In return, they got Emil Heineman and
yeah.
and the 16th and 17th overall picks, of which it seems like everyone's been raving about how they use those picks. So,
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on the Islanders offseason and what they've been able to do?
Yeah, it's weird because there are a few teams in the East that for like the last 2 seasons I have felt like they're kind of like holding on to something that is no longer there. For my first one is Boston, because Boston had that insane year a few years ago, and then last year they regressed, and then I was kind of going into this year feeling like, yeah, I think they're going to regress again, and now they're near the bottom of the East, which is just crazy to think about that turnaround. And then for the Islanders, I feel like they had was it back-to-back conference final appearances, and they lost to Tampa and I think both of them or something like that. And since then, they've kind of been this team that just like sneaks into the playoffs. They really like those overtime points, kind of helping them out. And it's felt like they've needed just something has had to change. I know they brought in Patrick Waugh, and maybe people were thinking that was going to be it, but then they go out to the Hurricanes in the first round, and then this year they missed the playoffs. And it seems like I don't know if they're going to do a full kind of tear down rebuild, or if they're just trying to do kind of a quick retool. It seems like they've really been opportunistic off of winning that draft lottery. They're going to bring in Hagens, which I'm really excited to see him. I think he will get some NHL time this year. I would be kind of shocked if he doesn't. And then with those 16, 17 picks, they pick up it was Eklund, who I think some people had going in the top 10. And then Atchison, who was like right about where he was supposed to fall, who also looks like he could have some NHL upside on the blue line. And I don't know how this year is going to go for them. Just kind of looking at my notes real quick. I would kind of expect that they're just that maybe they take a little bit of a regression, but at the same time they kept Palmieri, they keep Romanov, they keep DeAngelo. They really only lose, Dobson, and a few other kind of depth pieces. So I don't know where to place them, but I really like how, like I said, how opportunistic they've been with this draft, with just winning the draft lottery, and just kind of adding to their core, kind of replenishing it a little bit, which I think is better than kind of just sticking your head in the sand and just kind of hoping you make the playoffs every year and not really being able to do anything to improve the team. So.
They added Drouin in the offseason as well.
Okay.
Jonathan Drouin. I'm looking at it here, which is a pretty decent pickup. He had a pretty good year with Colorado, but they definitely seem like they have like an aging out core that they're gonna see where it can go this year. They're not totally saying goodbye to any opportunities, but looking at the standings, where do they finish up here? They were a pretty considerable amount away from making the playoffs last season. But with a couple of spark plugs, Schaefer coming in, it could be a really good, could be a turnaround year for them. And then I think we'll start to see a little bit more of that full rebuild mode once you start to see guys like Palmieri and Anders Lee start to move out or make their way out of the NHL lineups.
Now, what do you make of that in-state rival, like in the Rangers? Because that's another team where I am really confused. I was very shocked that they fell off as much of a cliff. They won the President's Trophy last year, right? And then this year they missed the playoffs. And I feel like, again, it's another team like this offseason that I look at and I'm like, okay, did you improve? They shed Keandre Miller, they shed Kreider, they bring in Gavrikov, which I think is good. They keep Cooley, which I thought was good too. But other than that, it's like maybe they are just hoping that this last year was kind of a blip, and then this year they'll kind of jump right back into it. But I don't know. It's a confusing team for me too.
I'm interested to see what they can do with JT Miller on a full season.
Yeah.
So let's take a look. So Shesterkin is going to be their guy again. You can never count out a team with a goalie of that caliber. Their defensive side, is questionable at best. Adam Fox obviously is going to be perennial Vezina candidate again, or not Vezina, Norris candidate again.
Yeah.
Adding Gavrikov to the blue line is big. Carson Soucy is like a bottom six guy. I think the rest of their blue line is pretty questionable.
Yeah.
But then you kind of have those main guys, right? Zibanejad, a lot of question marks around Zibanejad the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But with Panarin, Miller, maybe you see a bounce back year. Or just we've been waiting for a bounce back year from Alexis Lafreniere for about 5 years now. But I don't know, man. I don't see this team doing anything again this year.
Yeah.
Like, I think the Rangers could be like a fringe playoff team, but they don't seem to have the firepower to keep up with the other teams in the East.
Yeah, and like this is what's really interesting. I think the way a lot of general managers were approaching this offseason, and I think maybe now it'll change once, there's always going to be winners and losers in the offseason in terms of who can actually sign the guys they want. There's only one Mitch Marner to go around. You know what I mean? But there's so many teams that are saying, they went to the offseason saying we are looking to improve. Like even teams that have been at kind of the bottom of the barrel, like San Jose, who have gotten better as they've added these young guys. We're like, yeah, we're kind of we're not going crazy, but we're looking around if we can improve our team. Like that's what we want to do, and I think that's what a lot of GMs are going to be looking to do. But I'm curious in terms of expectations, how many teams, now that the offseason is kind of done with, how many of those kind of just kind of look at where they are in relation to other teams, and they look at what could be available in this upcoming draft if Gavin McKenna ends up being the player that he is kind of been hyped up to be. I know the draft in general is really deep as well. Like, I'm curious if there are a lot of teams that now take a look at where they are and are like, okay, we need to kind of change our gear a little bit, because it feels like the only team that has at least been open about the fact that they are okay with getting worse is like the Penguins. And like, other than that, I cannot think of a team that is like, been like, oh, we're kind of looking to the future now, type thing. So.
Well, I mean, there's been no teams that have like kind of went from like here and then said, okay, we're going to go from the middle to the bottom. But I don't think a lot of those teams who have been at the bottom have been making all these strides to get better. Like Chicago is going to be bad again. San Jose is going to be bad again.
Philadelphia, I think, will probably be bad again. I know they were close to a playoff spot 2 years ago, but I think they were extremely overperforming. And like, I think Seattle will be bad. And then like after that, it's like, I don't know. I think Boston should be bad, but I don't know if they want to be. Like, you know what I mean? So
I think what you'll see, what you'll see is I think every team, no matter where they're at in the standings or projected standings, is going to hold on to those first round picks for 26. Like, I don't think you're going to see, like, in these trades, you're going to see seconds and thirds, and you're going to see firsts from 27 and firsts from 29. But I don't think you're going to see teams move their 2026 first round pick willingly, whether they're expected to win the President's Trophy or not, because you just have no idea. I mean, maybe Florida's willing to move on, right? But it's like, if I'm the Canucks and a second line center becomes available on the trade market, I don't want to give up my first round pick, because what if, like, I don't want to do that, because what if we end up sucking still with our 2C? Then what? We give up McKenna, like we win the lottery, we lose McKenna because we wanted to,
and it's also funny because I think the fact that the Islanders won that draft lottery reinforces that. Because now it's like, for a few years it was just kind of like the number one or the number two team, like, got it. It's like, okay, that's what happens. But dude, the Islanders were like, were they number 10 or were they number 9 or something like that? And they move all the way up to 1. And even Utah,
were like, I think
even
they may
Utah
have been
moved
like,
up a ton of spaces.
They were like the last possible place to move up to 1 that they could have been. I'm pretty sure. I might be tripping. But Utah literally went from 14 to 4.
Like it was insane. Yeah. So I agree with you. And like, it's going to be interesting too for these teams that maybe are open about wanting to rebuild. And like, I say Pittsburgh just because that's what kind of Kyle Dubas has indicated. And he says he's got a lot of guys kind of on the block, but they also have Crosby. And I don't know if Crosby wants to be in a rebuild for the end of his career, or even if he doesn't want to do that, I don't know if he wants to move on either. Like, I don't know. That's a guy you talked about, Quinn Hughes, like having a lot of stake kind of in the Canucks. Like, I think pretty much every decision in Pittsburgh has to go through Sidney Crosby. Like,
Yeah.
And so what do you do if you need to rebuild and you can't be a team that, misses the playoffs by a good margin again, but at the same time, like, what does Sid want to do? Like, does he want to like move to Colorado and go play with McKinnon? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, maybe that's a blockbuster trade in the making. I don't know.
I've heard that every time like something comes out about him potentially getting moved, it makes it less and less likely for him to want to move because he's like, he hates that shit. Like he does not want to hear his name in the paper or like on the news. And so like, even if it was an option, like he might just like shut it down, but I don't know.
So I guess one thing we said we would talk about, and we've kind of going through these teams now, Florida, because I look at Florida and I look at what they did, and I think that in the long term, I honestly think this offseason was not good for them. But in terms of being a dynasty, like this is probably the most potential we've had. Obviously Tampa Bay was a few games away from cementing themselves in like that dynasty kind of talk, but like Florida feels even better than Tampa Bay did when they won their 2 cups.
100%.
It's very impressive to me. So what do you feel about those Florida moves?
So let me tell you, I'm looking at all this stuff right now. Okay, Bobrovsky is 36 years old. He's making $10 million for this next year. I am fairly confident that guy is way too competitive to give up the game until he's like physically incapable. I think he comes back to Florida on a short-term, low salary deal in 26, 27. So I think they got Bobrovsky, and he doesn't need to be young. He's playing at some of his best hockey he's ever played. And they got some, not scrub backup. They got Daniil Tarasov. Never heard of the guy. He's probably going to play like 16 games. But this is what I have to say is that Barkov, who's 29, Tkachuk, who's 27, Reinhart, who's 29, Bennett, who's 29, and Verhaeghe, who's 29. That's 5 guys who are like very impactful players are signed at least through 29-30. Okay? And if you tack 5 years onto each of those guys' ages, you're looking at 34 years old at the max. So these guys are going to be impactful players no matter what for the next 5 years. And they're all locked up. Like, it doesn't matter what you do with your middle 6, bottom 6. Like, your top 6 is locked up. You got Marchand locked up on a, admittedly a long contract. It's a 6-year. Was it a 6-year deal?
Yes, it was 6 years. Yeah.
So Marchand is 37.
40-something. Yeah.
Marchand is 37, right? He's going to be 43 at the end of that deal. I don't know. Like, Marchand's game is not necessarily like built on his speed. It could be sustainable. That maybe not the best contract you've ever seen. And I know people were questioning and making comments about Sam Bennett making 8. He's a highest career high 51-point guy. But there's a lot of question marks, right? Like, some people said, do you pay the guy based on his playoff performance, or do you pay the guy based on regular season? And I think historically in the NHL, you always pay guys based on the regular season play. If you paid guys based on their playoff performance, Devontae Smith-Pelly would have gotten a 5-year contract. Instead, he's out of the show, right? The year after winning the cup, right? But so 8 years for a guy whose career high is 51, questionable, right? At $8 million. But then you go down the line, you look at Anton Lundell. That's another guy who is just a stud. He's locked up for the next 5 years at $5 million. That's going to end up being a great value contract. That's another one. That's literally their top 6. That's 6 forwards locked up through 2030 who are impactful, plus Marchand. So that's 7, right? But I'm not including him because he's 37. And then you got, for the next 3 years, you've got Luosterainen, Rodriguez, and Bolfquist all signed up for the next 2 years. So 25, 26. Like, Florida's going to be a fucking wagon. Like, it's going to be scary. Like, there is no – you're right. It may not be great in 5 years, or it will be great in 5 years. Forgive me for that. They'll still be fine. It may not be great in 10 years, right, when you got, like, no draft picks or whatever. But this team is going to win 2 to 3 more Stanley Cups. I think that they will. And – I don't know, man. You got Seth Jones locked up until 29-30. You got Ekblad locked up until 29-30. You got fucking Forsling. Oh, my God, dude.
It's just so stacked.
The further I look down this list, the scarier it gets, because they've got key pieces who are not old as shit, right? 29,
Yeah.
30-year-olds locked up for the next 5 years. Dude.
And I'll get ahead of the conversation because I know, like, obviously, like, Biz has been big on this, like, oh, it's the salary, they don't have the state income tax, like all that sort of stuff. But like, dude, at some point, like, if you even look at the deals that some of these guys are signing, and you even factor in, I know that a lot of the cap projection websites and stuff will factor in, hey, this is what they could get, on an equitable amount for state income tax. Like, some of these like numbers, it's more than just like, oh yeah, I can make a little bit more money, here on a cheaper deal sort of thing. Like, a lot of it, I think, comes down to like these guys want to play together and they love playing together. And that was a big thing. Like, it sounds so cheesy, when Paul Maurice was talking about, yeah, like the secret is like they just like love each other. Like, they love playing together. They love being in the room. Like, we have a great culture. But like, that is so important. Like, you talked about the Canucks, like that kind of, having that locker room issue kind of dominated the entire season. Like, I think it's crazy to pretend like that human side of it doesn't play a factor into like where guys want to go and how they perform. Like, dude, it's scary. It's scary to see a team. And I think obviously NHL is a copycat league. They're always trying to kind of do what the last winner did to win. But I think Florida is such a good example of a team that like they didn't really like copy anyone necessarily. They kind of made their own way, which is like they brought in these key pieces, they brought them in on good deals, and they have such a good culture that people want to be in Florida. And I think that's something that teams should look to a lot more than just like, obviously the conversation's been, if you saw the draft, like there was no defenseman under 6 foot that was drafted, I think. And like the idea is that, well, Florida's mean, they like run into people, like we got to be like that, we got to play like more physical, which physicality is a great part of the game, but like the physicality isn't what makes Florida like a team that people want to play for the rest of their career. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah. And then you look at this, like, same thing, just tacking onto your argument. Like, Aaron Ekblad's a shutdown defenseman who is a right-hand shot, will immediately probably be the top defenseman on 15 NHL teams. He's making $6.1 million, okay? Tax or no tax, that guy is probably commanding $8 to $8.5, maybe $9 million on the open market. You're telling me he's not losing $3 million, right, in state tax. Like, this guy took a major discount to stay in Florida because he wants to be there. And then to touch on your point as well, they are doing something that we really haven't seen, right? Barkov they drafted, Lundell they drafted, Ekblad they drafted, but then you look at the rest of this team. Tkachuk acquired by trade. Reinhart acquired by trade. Bennett acquired by trade. Verhaeghe. I think Reinhart, was he traded? Was that a trade or was that a contract that he signed?
I'm not sure. I know he was in Buffalo, right? Was that? I feel like he got traded
he was
out.
in Buffalo.
I feel like he's the guy that
no, it was
Buffalo
a trade. It was
out.
Devin Levi and a first-round pick for Reinhart.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, they've acquired these players, and it hasn't just been like building through the draft. They've been aggressive in the free agency market. They've been aggressive on the trade market, and they have built a absolute fucking wagon. And then they get guys like Mackenzie Samsikovich or Samsikovich. I don't know if you recognize the name, right? The guy, he's 22 years old. This past year in the NHL, he put up 31 points, serviceable, right? 31 points could easily go out and get you $2 million.
I think they got him at near like league minimum. Like, I think
they got him on the league minimum. Minimum. He signed for $775. And like, the guy literally put up 30 points. He scored 15 goals. 15 goals on the open market right now could fetch you $2 million. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
And it's just like, Florida's scary, man. And no matter how you look at the 3 contracts they signed, re-signed, it doesn't matter that Marchand's going to be a skills coach on the 3rd year of his contract. It doesn't matter because it's going to result in playoff success. And hockey in the South is real, man. It's real.
And I said that I don't think Florida really copied anyone, but then I feel like I do need to make put an asterisk on that comment because the team that they lost to in that first Stanley Cup final, Vegas, is also kind of notorious for being a team that just goes out and grabs things. I think they do it sometimes to a bit of a fault because instead of like them grabbing key players and keeping them, they kind of just treat players like extremely expendably. Like they're like, oh, this is the next thing. I'm getting him. Like, you're out, that sort of thing. But they do it again. Like, I think they're going to do this for as long as they are successful at it. They get Mitch Marner, and I don't. Did they get it? Was it a $12 million deal? Was that the final number, which I think is fair for him? But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, that's fair for him. I mean, he's a perennial 100-point scorer. I don't know. Let me look. Well, no, he's not a perennial 100-point scorer. Let me take that back. This first year above 100 points, but he's a point per game guy.
Yeah,
hasn't been below a point per game in 6 years. So
yeah,
it's worth every penny of that contract. $12 million for the next 8 years. Pietrangelo is done with hockey. It seems. So that's unfortunate, but that's like cap that gets let up by Vegas. Yeah, like Vegas is another one of those teams. They've never been bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they missed the playoff like once. I think they missed it once, and it was because they were all injured.
Yeah. So it's yeah. But Florida's done a better job than Vegas because, like what you said, I don't think they don't treat their play. It's totally business there versus Florida is like there's more of a culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, Vegas is a team, dude, like, they have been the team that makes me the most angry is the Vegas Golden Knights. It stems back to, getting just absolutely whooped by them a few years ago. And then, like, we got our revenge, but even that series was brutal. And, like, ever since then, like, they have a really good kind of rivalry going with Dallas, but, like, just everything about them, like you said, it's like all business. And it's kind of like that. If you ever met like a dude who like is really on that like kind of business side of things, it's just like, dude, this guy needs to get punched in the face. Like, that's the biggest Golden Knights to me, I feel like. And it's and I say that, but at the same time, you got to respect it because like they are just consistently good, and they are I think the best team in the league at being like maybe realistic isn't the right word, but just making the moves that they feel need to be made. And they don't worry about how it looks. They don't worry about kind of the scars that get left behind there. I think in the end it probably makes it hard for guys to want to come in there. But at the same time, if you're like someone like Jack Eichel who was at the time that's the shiny piece to go after, they bring him in, they win the cup. Like if that's what you're willing to. If that's what it ultimately brings you to is that championship, then I think it can be enticing. And like Vegas is a fun place to live too. Like who doesn't want to, go live in Vegas? So.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing to note though that's a little bit interesting is that when in the off season you're allowed to be over the salary cap. By like I don't know what the specific number is, but you're allowed to be. Vegas right now is 7.6 million over the cap. But actually, it looks like it hasn't counted the LTIR pool, so it might. They might not have subtracted Pietrangelo from there yet, but anyway.
Yeah, and that'll be. I think, and this can segue into the CBA a little bit. I know it doesn't take effect until 26-27 is when the new CBA starts.
Right.
But they did address the LTIR loophole that, a lot of people, including myself, give a lot of, put a lot of like, the eyebrow raise towards Vegas whenever whoever it is out until the playoffs. But I guess I can't complain about it because the Stars also, that's the only reason they were able to pick up like Rantanen and Granlund and all these pieces is because Sagan was out for most of the season and then Heiskanen was out for most of the season. So, but yeah, allegedly they've made a workaround where now you're the team that you skate in the playoffs again, starting in 26-27 has to be cap compliant. So what are your thoughts on the CBA? Anything that stuck out to you that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, on the LTIR stuff, I think that's a big change, just that your lineup has to be. But another thing that, like, right in the past, like if a team with a $10 million player, the guy goes down for 25-plus games, you can throw him on LTIR, and then you can accrue the full cap space of that player. And then once, the season ends, you can have whoever you filled that $10 million with plus your $10 million guy. So it's not going to work like that anymore starting 26-27. So what they're going to do is if that player is going to be on LTIR and come back before the playoffs or before the end of the season, you don't get the full relief on that player. You're going to get the league average salary of the previous year. So for 24-25, that was $3.82 million, and then following years, I'm sure at 26-27, you'll have a elevated league average. But for a team like Ekblad was out. Ekblad was out for some extended period of time. That's how they were able to bring on the Marchand contract.
Yeah.
You don't have like the $8 million or whatever he was making that all the way off. So that's arguably bigger change than the actual just like you're needing to have a salary compliant roster, because now you're not able to make those moves during the season that could help you later down, because you're going to have a lot less relief. So I think that's a big thing. I think that's probably the biggest component of the LTIR stuff. Some more things that I wanted to highlight specifically were the contract term limits, as well as we talked about the paper loans already. We don't need to touch too much on that. And then the e-bug stuff, which isn't super huge. It's just kind of interesting to talk about. So number one on the contract term limits, obviously the CBA is the agreement between the NHL and the NHLPA on kind of just working conditions. I'm surprised that the Players Association was okay with allowing these contracts to go from 7 and 8 to 6 and 7, just because I think that's a little bit less, quote unquote, security there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was interesting, and I wonder if that was something that was kind of, I'm trying to think about. I know that I can't think off the top of my head. We'll probably go down the list and then we could come to it. But I wonder if there was something else in the CBA that the players were really, really pushing for. Maybe it was the no more what do you call it? The no more dress code type thing. But I kind of doubt it. Because that was kind of a pretty big win, I feel like, for the teams and for the owners. And I know that in terms of think the players got. There was a lot of stuff I felt like for future players, some changes with how the entry level contracts work. I think just kind of making them more consistent down the line, regardless of what league you're kind of coming in from. And I think too the AHL and now with the NCAA kind of letting in CHL players, the AHL is gonna allow I think it's like one 19-year-old player per team essentially to go develop there. It feels like there's a lot of kind of good changes that will help with developing players specifically. So, and I don't know if that's something that the NHLPA was thinking about necessarily, but maybe that is kind of the trade-off that they got there. What are your thoughts on that?
I think based on what I've heard other people say is that the NHLPA took a lot of hits here, in terms of the term limits is kind of shittier for the players. Another thing is bonus structures is less great for the players. Deferred salary contracts are no longer an option, so a little bit less variety of options there for players. I don't know if I already said signing bonuses. Signing bonuses could be most of the dollar value of your contract in previous years, right? Just as long as the money gets to you. The cap hit would stay the same, but now it's I think it's 20% or 60% is the max compensation, right, of your AAV that can be put in the signing bonuses. So it seems like the NHLPA took a lot of kind of they allowed more things than I feel like they would usually allow, and based on what other people are saying, they did that just because the NHL is doing so well. There's a lot of more money coming in, so that they're willing to take a couple more hits because the overall salary, the overall amount that these guys are getting paid is just going to keep going up and up and up. So they're more willing to negotiate. That's really the only reason I can think. I don't think that they saw something that was so great in the CBA that they said, okay, we'll take this and sacrifice that, because I just don't see anything else in the CBA that's so explosively positive for the PA that would warrant them to take that sacrifice. But I don't know. That's me kind of taking in other talking heads and filtering what I heard took as value. So
that's a good point. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I think that was one thing we saw this offseason. And part of it was just because, a lot of guys stayed with the teams they're at. There weren't that many, kind of big name free agents out there. So I think that there were a lot of teams that were content with, well, we didn't get our guy, let's just kind of hold off. But I noticed there's a lot of teams that have a good amount of cap space. There's a handful that have spent to the cap are over. But there are a lot of teams, especially like contending teams. I think about the Hurricanes, who I also have in like that conversation of maybe off-season winners. Like they have $10 million, and like there's not really a need in their roster as far as I can see. Maybe you want a little bit of a goaltending upgrade, but Freddie Anderson is more than serviceable. And yeah, they still have $10 million. They get, Keandre Miller. They get Ehlers was like kind of the big win for them too there. And there's other teams that kind of fit that mold too. Winnipeg has a lot of money to spend still, and they have to re-sign some players. We talked about kind of Calgary still having money. Minnesota still has money. Like it feels like it's a little bit different than years past during the flat cap era, where people, pretty much every team was spending to that cap ceiling.
Yeah, everyone was screwed.
And I think it's a good point to point out that there's more money to go around. Players are getting bigger paychecks, and maybe that is something that's kind of keeping them happy there.
Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of my take on it too. Anything else you wanted to touch on here in the CBA? Like I know we kind of said a couple of things. There's a lot of stuff right here. Neck guards 26, 27. That's going to be mandated. New players have to wear it. Other older players who played one game or more before 26, 27 have the option to not wear it. I think that's a good rule.
I agree.
They implemented it in the AHL this past year. There was no grandfather rule; just everyone had to wear it. They're doing it in USA Hockey for youth. Everyone's got to wear them. I started wearing one a couple of years ago when the guy died in the English league. So I think that's a good.
I agree.
Good deal there. Players age 25 to 27 from Europe no longer require an entry-level contract, and will be subject to the same entry-level rules as North American players. Okay, so that's an interesting one. I think Panarin was like 24 when he signed his like 1-year entry-level deal with Chicago, and everyone was like, "What the fuck? Like, why is this guy eligible for the Calder?" But anyway,
there wasn't. Unless you had anything else that stood out for the CBA, I am glad that it's just kind of done with, and we don't have to worry about like any lockout situations or anything like that, because that's always super super unfortunate when it goes that way. But yeah, the NHL in general is just in, like you said, a really really good place right now. I think they're making more money than they have in quite some time. Like they're successful. I know they keep saying they're not in expansion mode, but I think this was something in the CBA, is that once again, like I'm pretty sure players are exempt from like getting some of the money from the expansion fee. Like it just goes to the owner still, which kind of makes me wonder if maybe, as much as they say they're not in expansion mode, that they would at least try to expand once or twice if they're considering going beyond 32 teams.
I think they will. So. I think they will expand. I think there's too much motion in like the Atlanta and Houston markets for them not to. But another big thing that was part of the CBA was players no longer have to like pay a share of escrow to the league, which is huge because like I know in some years like especially like the COVID years, like they were getting screwed heavily with a large sum of their paychecks going towards just paying out the league. But yeah, so that's another thing. But I don't know. Yeah, the league's saying, no expansion, but I think there will be $2 billion expansion buy-in. Changes the game. So
yeah, and like you mentioned, Houston and Atlanta, are those the ones that do you see that being the next two kind of NHL cities? Or I know there's always the talk of like they're going to go back to Arizona at some point. At least the league wants to. Quebec City always gets the nod too, but it does feel like it could be pretty soon before the Stars have to stop using the one state one team Texas hockey kind of moniker if they have a team down in Houston to play against. So
I think Houston has traction. I think they have the infrastructure. The Toyota Center can hold the team. I think Houston should be at the top of the list. I've heard them get thrown around, but I don't know. I've also heard Austin get thrown out. And if Austin ends up getting a team before Houston, I'm going to be really, really mad.
I will say a lot of the Texas or the Dallas Stars insiders and the guys down in Cedar Park basically said that they haven't heard anything like that yet before. And also Austin, it doesn't have an NHL capable arena unless they're going to kick the Texas Stars out and play in like the 6,000 seat arena in the suburbs of Austin. But it would be something kind of crazy because Austin has been that city that kind of they have a soccer team, which is pretty popular down there, and they feel like they could be a good sports city. But yeah, I would be absolutely shocked if Austin gets in over Houston. So
yeah. So we'll see. We'll keep monitoring that.
yeah.
But yeah, if you got nothing else, dude, I got nothing else either. Like I feel like we've covered just a lot of content today, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just regardless of how many views we get on this, probably not a lot. Certainly not a full 2-hour watch time on the stats, but it's just fun talking hockey. So
Absolutely.
If you got anything else, bro, like bring it up. If not, good talking to you, and yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing me on. It's always fun to chat about this. So it's gonna be an exciting season for sure. So we'll see how everything ends up shaking out. I thought the off season was, like you said, I think you said at the beginning, it was like a little bit more kind of disappointing, at least that July 1st free agency day. But it's gonna be really interesting to see, especially with all these teams that kind of stuck with their guys, was kind of seemed like the mantra, like there wasn't too much movement. Like it'll be interesting to see how different it is, looking at the standings at the end of the year versus where we kind of thought it was going to be this year, and also see how it compares to last year's standings, how much movement there actually ends up being. So yeah, that's everything I've got. So like I said, thank you so much for bringing me on, and we'll have to do it again sometime. So
all right, dude, sounds good, bro. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining me. See you later, man.
absolutely. See ya.
All right, bye.